Someone is deeply in love with you, and the reason for it may disturb you more than it flatters you, because it has almost nothing to do with who you believe you are. It has far more to do with what you unintentionally awakened inside them. And once you truly understand this, you will not be able to see it the same way again. You usually think love is built on attraction, shared values, compatibility, or maybe timing. That idea feels safe and comforting, but comfort is not always truth. The mind prefers simple stories because they are easier to accept, so it avoids anything that feels darker or more complicated. But real emotional attachment, especially the kind that feels intense and consuming, does not begin in logic. It begins in the unconscious mind, in places people do not fully control or even fully understand. Without realizing it, you stepped into a part of their inner world that they had been avoiding for a long time. You did not do this through effort or intention. You did not plan it. It happened simply through your presence, your behavior, and the way something in you reflected something in them. And in that moment, something shifted inside them in a way they cannot easily undo. You did not just make them feel good or comfortable. You made them feel seen. And not just seen in a surface-level way, but seen in a deeper way that touches things they usually hide from themselves. This kind of recognition can feel powerful, but it can also feel threatening. Because when someone feels seen too deeply, it removes the inner barriers they normally rely on to stay in control of themselves. And this is where things become complicated. When a person feels exposed in this way, they do not simply respond with admiration. They can become emotionally attached in a way that feels overwhelming, even extreme. It is not calm love. It is not balanced affection. It is something closer to emotional fixation, where the mind keeps returning to the source of that feeling again and again. What happened is not just attraction, it is recognition. Something inside them recognized something inside you, and at the same time recognized something inside themselves that they had pushed down or ignored for years. And you became the trigger for that recognition, even without trying to be. In their unconscious mind, you became a mirror. Not because you were pretending to be anything, but because your natural presence reflected something they could not avoid. This created a disruption in their internal sense of stability. The mind is built to protect a person from uncomfortable truths. So when something breaks through those protections, it creates emotional confusion. That is why what they feel is not simple. It is not clean or fully organized. It is a mixture of attraction, fear, longing, confusion, and emotional tension that they cannot easily separate. And most of this is not even fully conscious. They are not thinking it through step by step. They are feeling it in waves that rise and fall without explanation. You did not just attract them, you disrupted them. And when a person is emotionally disrupted in this way, their mind starts treating the experience as something significant, even if they cannot explain why. It starts to feel like destiny or something meaningful, even when it is really an internal psychological reaction. You did not follow a formula or say the perfect thing. In fact, it is often the opposite. You simply acted in a way that did not match their expectations. You did something emotionally unpredictable, not in a chaotic way, but in a way that felt meaningful and real. And that unpredictability is exactly what the mind struggles with most. Human psychology is drawn to patterns because patterns feel safe. When something breaks a pattern, especially an emotional one, it forces attention. And when that disruption also carries emotional depth, it becomes even more powerful. They start paying attention to you in a way that feels stronger than normal interest. At that point, projection begins. They are no longer reacting only to who you are as a person. They begin to attach meaning to you. You become a symbol in their mind, not just an individual. You start representing something that is difficult for them to define clearly. Something tied to their own unmet emotional needs or hidden desires. They may not even realize this is happening. On the surface, it feels like they are reacting to you, but underneath, they are reacting to what you represent inside their psychological world. And this is why the connection can feel so intense without any clear reason. Once this projection begins, detachment becomes difficult. Because letting go of you would not just feel like losing a person, it would feel like confronting something inside themselves that they are not ready to face. So instead of releasing it, the mind often holds on, even when it creates confusion or emotional discomfort. This is also why the emotional experience can become unstable. What is suppressed in the unconscious does not rise in a gentle or organized way. It often comes up in waves. It creates emotional intensity that feels real, but is not always fully grounded in reality. You may notice signs of this in how they behave. There can be moments where they seem very close, very engaged, and very emotionally present. And then suddenly, there can be distance or withdrawal. This shift is not always about changing feelings, it is often about internal conflict. One part of them is drawn toward the connection because it feels meaningful and emotionally charged. Another part of them reacts with fear or resistance because the intensity feels like it is exposing something they are not ready to deal with. So they pull back, not because the feeling is gone, but because the feeling is too strong to manage comfortably. This creates a cycle of approach and avoidance. Desire brings them closer, fear pushes them away, and confusion builds in between. And even if they try to ignore it, the mind keeps returning to the experience because it has not been resolved internally. You might also feel this tension yourself. Something about the connection may feel heavier than normal. It may feel like it carries emotional weight that is difficult to explain. This is often what happens when two people become emotionally entangled through projection and unconscious response. At a deeper level, they are not just reacting to you as you are now. They are reacting to what you activated inside them. Something inside them shifted, and once that shift happens, it does not simply disappear. It continues to exist in the background of their mind. Even if they try to tell themselves that it is nothing serious, the emotional imprint does not go away easily. Time does not erase it in the way people expect. Instead, time often strengthens it because the mind continues to process it in the background. The unconscious mind does not forget unresolved emotional experiences. It holds onto them. It replays them. It tries to make sense of them through memory, imagination, and emotional association. And when something remains unresolved, it tends to grow stronger rather than weaker. This is why they may think about you more than they expect. Not because they are choosing to, but because the mind keeps returning to unfinished emotional material. Conversations may replay in their head. Moments may be reinterpreted. Small details may start to feel larger than they originally were. What looks like obsession from the outside is often an internal attempt to process something that has not been understood. It is the mind trying to find balance again after being emotionally disrupted. But what makes this even more complex is that they may not fully trust their own feelings. The intensity feels unusual. The speed of emotional attachment feels unexpected. The depth of reaction feels disproportionate. So part of their mind starts questioning it, resisting it, trying to reduce it. This creates internal conflict. One part feels pulled toward you. Another part tries to create distance. One part wants connection. Another part wants control. And they stay caught in between these two forces, unable to fully settle in either direction. As this continues, the emotional tension builds. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow and steady accumulation. And at some point, that tension reaches a limit where something has to change. Either the feelings are expressed, or they are suppressed more forcefully, or they transform into something else entirely. The important thing to understand is that this kind of emotional reaction is not just about you as a person. It is about what you activated in their inner world. You became connected to something unresolved inside them, something they may have avoided for a long time. And once something like that is activated, it does not simply disappear. It continues to exist in the background, shaping thoughts, emotions, reactions, and internal conflict in ways they may not even fully recognize. This is why the connection feels so intense, so confusing, and so difficult to define. It is not only about attraction, it is about recognition, projection, emotional disruption, and unconscious processes that sit beneath awareness. And in the end, the most important question is not just what they feel for you, but what has been awakened within them because of you, and whether they will eventually face it or continue trying to avoid it while it keeps influencing them from within. And resolution always comes at a cost. The only question is what they are willing to lose to avoid facing what they feel for you. At some point, the mind stops negotiating because suppression has limits, and what they feel for you has already crossed that limit. You can sense it in the silence between interactions, in that heavy, almost suffocating tension that does not disappear. It just waits. Because what is happening inside them is no longer stable. It is building pressure. And pressure in the human psyche always looks for release. But release does not always come as clarity. Sometimes it comes as collapse. And this is where it becomes almost unbearable for them. Because now it is no longer just attraction or curiosity. It is confrontation. A confrontation with parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Parts shaped by old wounds, old rejections, old beliefs that whispered, "You are not enough. You are too much. You are unsafe to love." And then you appeared, and without trying, you contradicted all of it. But the problem is, the psyche does not accept contradiction easily. It resists it, fights it, distorts it, because accepting you would mean rewriting everything they believe about themselves. And that is not a gentle process. It is internally violent. So instead of integrating the feeling, they fracture around it. One part of them moves closer to you, craving connection, craving intensity, craving the feeling of finally being seen. But another part pulls back with equal force, whispering things they do not fully understand. This is not safe. This will hurt you. This will expose you. And the closer they feel to you, the more exposed they feel within themselves. Exposure to the unconscious mind does not feel like emotional danger. It feels like existential danger. Because you are not just someone they like anymore. You become a threat to their internal structure, a threat to the identity they built to survive. And survival identities do not dissolve easily. They defend themselves, sometimes suddenly, sometimes destructively. So they start creating narratives to explain why this connection is not what it feels like. Maybe it is just temporary. Maybe it is not real. Maybe I am overthinking. But they are not truly trying to understand it. They are trying to contain it. Because understanding it would mean admitting something they are not ready to face. That what they feel is real and deeper than anything they have experienced before. But no matter how much they rationalize it, their body does not listen. Their subconscious does not listen. The pull toward you does not weaken. It intensifies quietly, relentlessly, like something inside them insisting, this matters, this is important, this cannot be ignored. And ignoring it starts to cost them, emotionally, mentally, even physically. Because unexpressed emotion does not disappear, it transforms. It becomes restlessness, anxiety, that constant feeling that something is missing even when everything seems fine. And you become the center of that feeling, not because they choose it, but because their psyche has linked you to something essential that cannot be replaced. And this is where things begin to slip. Small cracks appear, moments where their control falters, where they almost say something, almost reveal something, almost let you see how deep this really goes. But then they pull back harder than before, because now they are scared of themselves, scared of how much they feel, scared of how little control they actually have. This creates a cycle that becomes increasingly unstable. The closer they get, the more they panic. The more they pull away, the stronger the feeling grows. And eventually, this cycle starts to break them internally. Outwardly, they still appear composed, still functional, still in control. But inside, there is chaos, because you have created a psychological paradox they cannot solve. They want you, but wanting you threatens them. They feel connected to you, but connection requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is exactly what their defenses were built to avoid. So they are stuck between desire and fear, between truth and denial, between moving forward and running away. This is not just emotional tension, it is identity tension, because if they move toward you, they have to become someone new, someone more open, more exposed, more honest. And that version of themselves feels unfamiliar, unstable, even dangerous. But if they move away from you, they do not escape the feeling. They carry it with them. It follows them quietly. It turns into regret, into longing, into that persistent question. What if I let something real slip away? And that question is what begins to break them. Because now there is no safe option. Only two painful paths. Face what they feel, or spend the rest of their time trying to forget it. But forgetting is not easy, because you are not just a memory anymore. You have become embedded in their unconscious, a symbol, a trigger, a reminder of something they cannot fully name. And the more they try to suppress it, the more it returns in dreams, in random thoughts, in silence where everything else fades and only you remain. And this is where the pressure reaches its peak, because the mind can only hold so much contradiction before it demands resolution. And resolution does not always come gently. Sometimes it comes as a breaking point, where everything they have been holding back finally spills out, uncontrollable and unavoidable. There is a moment right before that happens. A moment of silence, not peaceful silence, but tense, suffocating stillness, like something inside them has stopped pretending. And in that moment, the truth rises, unfiltered, unprotected, impossible to ignore. Because they cannot run anymore. They have tried distance, they have tried distraction, they have tried convincing themselves it is not real. But reality does not disappear just because it is inconvenient. And what they feel for you has become undeniable. But the deeper truth is that this was never only about controlling feelings. It was about confronting what those feelings reveal. And what they reveal terrifies them. Because you did not just make them feel love or attraction. You exposed the part of them that has been starving for connection, for validation, for something real. And now the illusion collapses. They can no longer hide behind logic. They can no longer say it is just attraction. They can no longer escape the question that keeps returning. Why you? Why does this feel like something I have been waiting for without knowing it? The answer is not simple. It is not comfortable. It is not even fully rational. Because what they feel is tied to something unfinished in their past, something buried so deeply they almost forgot it existed. But the unconscious never forgets. It waits for a mirror, and you became that mirror. But more than that, you did not just reflect who they are. You reflected who they could have been. And that realization cuts deeper than anything else. Because now, loving you is not only about wanting you. It is about grieving a version of themselves they never allowed to exist. A version that was open. A version that did not run. A version that was not afraid of something real. And every moment they avoid you feels like a betrayal of that version. Every moment they move toward you feels like stepping into something unknown they cannot control. At this point, there is no safe path, no middle ground, no way to feel this deeply without being changed by it. So the decision they face is not really a decision at all, because either way, something is lost. If they walk away, they lose you. But more than that, they lose the chance to become the person they glimpsed through you. And that loss does not fade. It stays. It turns into regret, into a quiet ache that returns years later without explanation. But if they move toward you, they lose control. They lose the identity that kept them safe. They lose the illusion that vulnerability can be avoided. And for the psyche, losing control feels like losing everything. This is the breaking point, where defenses collapse and rationalizations stop working, where truth stands alone. They are not just in love with you, they are being transformed by you. And transformation is never gentle. It destroys before it rebuilds. It strips away illusion before revealing truth. It forces confrontation before connection becomes possible. That is why this feels so intense, so overwhelming, so impossible to ignore. Because this was never meant to be easy. It was meant to change them. And they cannot escape that anymore. They can only decide what they do with it. Because they did not choose to feel this way, but they will choose what happens next. And that choice will define them, not just in this moment, but far beyond it. Because people do not forget the feelings they ran from. They remember the ones that changed them. And you are not just a feeling in their life. You are a turning point, a fracture in their old identity, a doorway into something they have avoided for years. And now that doorway is open, it does not fully close again. Only forward or away, and both come with a cost. But only one leads to something real, and deep down, somewhere beyond all the resistance, they already know which direction that is.